In this video, I am going to make a version of my free triangle bag pattern. There are a few changes that I've made on this. Number one is that I've extended the straps to make it have a bow on the top. But of course, if you just wanted to have a plain straight strap, you could just go with what's on the actual pattern. Also, I have done this out of a really beautiful denim, which I got from Fabric Godmother. I'm also making myself a matching pair of ballet pumps. So if you want to follow along with that make, you can head over to I Can Make Shoes. And in the meantime, we will get started on making this bag. So I'm gonna start with the bag because it's a faster make. And the first thing I'm gonna do is cut out all of my pieces. So I've got my main pattern here, which I'm gonna use for the lining and the outside of the bag. And I'm just trying to decide whether I wanna have a seam down the front on this fabric or not. I think I will because it just gives the bag a little bit more structure, but if you don't wanna have the seam down the front, you could totally just cut this on the fold. So I'm gonna start by cutting 4 of these pieces, 2 lefts and 2 rights. All right, so I'm gonna put those pieces to the side to cut out properly in a sec. And I'm gonna cut my strap. Now, I actually wanna make the strap on this one a little longer than usual because I'm actually gonna tie it up in a little bow on the shoulder. Now, the original strap is about 35 centimeters long. I'm gonna extend it to 60 so that I can do this bow, but I'm also gonna do 2 straps rather than just one handle in the middle so that the bow can tie into itself. So I'm actually gonna do one long strap of about 120 centimeters, and then I'm just gonna cut it in half. If this is making no sense, just stick with me because it'll make a lot more sense as I'm doing it. Now, the other thing to note is that the strap is about 9 centimeters wide because we are gonna stitch it into a tube. So I'll want this one to be 120 long by 9 centimeters wide. All right, so full disclosure, I actually ended up doing that even longer because I just went to the end of my piece of fabric. So it ended up being about 135 in the end, but I can always just trim it down. So we'll see how this goes at the end of the bag. So I've got my main pieces there, which I'm gonna cut out in a sec, and I've got my straps there, and I'm now gonna move on to my lining. Now I'm just gonna use like a calico for the lining of this, but you can totally use whatever you want. Like a nice cotton twill or something would work really well, but this calico is actually quite good quality and I've got loads of it, so I'm gonna use this. Now when it comes to the lining, I have a little trick for this. I don't wanna have the seam down the front, so I'm actually gonna fold the 1 centimeter seam allowance away, and I've got the lining folded in half, and I'm gonna place the pattern on the fold and trace it out, and then that will open up to be one lovely big piece. And you can totally do this with the main outside of the bag as well if you don't want to have the seam down the front. But I do think the seam gives it a nice detail. And there we have our lining. So I just need to do one more of those, and then I'll probably give it a little iron because it's a bit creased. And yes, I know it's horrific that I'm ironing directly onto my table, but I just do stuff like that sometimes. What can I say? So I'm gonna pop all the leopard print pieces to the side, and I'm gonna stitch up my linings first. So the first thing I wanna do here is stitch the base closed, and we're gonna do that by putting right sides together. So right side to right side, and I'm gonna stitch 1 centimeter across the whole base. Okay, so I've stitched across there and I'm just going to open it up and press it open because I have the iron right next to me, but you could just totally skip this bit if you don't want to do it. All right, and then we're gonna fold it back on itself again. So we're still inside out, right sides to right sides, and we're gonna stitch up the sides, but it's super important that we leave a little gap on one side, around about there, so that we can pull it inside out. So onto the upper side of the bag, I'm gonna start by taking two pieces like this, flipping them right side to right side and stitching 1 centimeter straight down the center seam. I am gonna change my thread to a dark brown though, so I'll quickly rethread the sewing machine. So we've taken a vote on whether or not I should bother top stitching the center seam, and we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna quickly do a stitch along both sides of that seam, just for a little extra detail. Now to close up the base. Next, I'm going to close up the sides, and this one's even easier than the lining because I just go straight down on both sides without leaving any gap at all. Okay, so moving on, we are going to put our little base in, and by doing that, this sort of adds a bit of depth to the bag, but I kind of want to open up the corner into a triangle, and I like to open that side seam as well, just so it's nice and flat. And then I like to take a ruler and measure to about 8 centimeters, so roughly about there, and then we'll just draw a line right across there. And then we can go ahead and stitch straight across that line, and we're going to do that on all of the corners, including our linings. And then we can just go ahead and cut off all of our little triangles. I'm going to now flip the bag right side up and really make sure I push those corners right out. And we're then going to put this inside the lining so that we've got right sides touching each other. So the lining should still be inside out at this point. And at that stage, I'm going to go ahead and stitch around the top line. So this is the fun part. We are gonna turn the bag right side out. So I'm putting my hand into that little gap that I left in the lining, and I'm gonna pull the whole bag through that gap. And then just before we pop the lining back inside, we are gonna close up that little gap by just turning it in on itself and stitching that closed. All right, this bag is looking really good so far. I am just going to do a top stitch around the top line and get my bow attached. Okay, so I'm gonna pop the bag to the side and I'm gonna focus on my handles. So I'm just gonna fold them back on themselves and stitch them into little tubes, just going across one end as well, so that one end is closed and one end is open. And then we'll go ahead and flip these back on themselves. Cool, so I've turned my straps and they're looking awesome, and now I just need to attach them to my bag. But first I'm gonna pop them to the side, and I'm actually just gonna stitch these side bits in like that so that it's a little bit skinnier at the top so that I can put my strap over the top of this. So I'm just folding that in at the top, and I'm just gonna stitch across there before I attach my straps. Now when it comes to attaching the strap, I'm going to take the open end and I'm just going to fold it in on itself so that we don't have that frayed edge, like that. And then I'm actually going to place it over the top like that. So I'm sort of sandwiching the main body of the bag in between the straps. And then I'm just going to stitch a little box on that area. I like to keep it so that the seam is on the inside as well, the seam of the strap. Okay, and then last but not least, let's tie it in a bow. And there we have it, my finished triangle bag with a leopard print denim and a bow on the top. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. So now I'm gonna get started on my matching ballet pumps, and you can follow along over on I Can Make Shoes. And at this stage, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to try it on.